Well, welcome in. Happy Thursday, everybody. I'm Clint Skutchan with T360. We're continuing our social connecting series, and today we're focusing in on some leadership approaches, and you know, as urgency kind of builds, there's a lot of nervous energy out there. We thought it might be good to bring in a few folks that have some particular insights on leadership approaches, and have them share that with you here today. Again, of course, as always, we want to make this interactive. It's not only about connecting with the panelists, but all the attendees as well. So be sure to use the chat function. Be sure to do the drop down on that where it says select to all panelists and attendees so we can all see what the conversations look like. Ask your questions there, and of course, don't be shy to chat amongst yourselves and share your knowledge as well with our panelists. And so yeah, that's there. We've got the Q&A function if you want to specifically ask a question of one of the panelists. Shoot that, so that we'll be monitoring that as well. And yeah, that's the fun thing. So good afternoon, I think it is everywhere for everyone, gentlemen.
It's snowing.
Sure.
It's here in Toronto. It's dreadful.
Yeah, I was going to ask if anyone else was enjoying the blizzard, because we've got about 8 inches here in Colorado.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Dave? You guys got 8 inches of snow there at the Broadmoor?
Yeah, it's looking pretty nasty out there, except for that. No, I'm in Virginia, and it's 60 and sunny.
Awesome. Well, Jack Miller with T360 is just getting off another webinar, so he'll be popping in along the way. But I wanted to start with the tough question first. I actually have to give credit. I was watching, there's so much live music right now, and watching the musicians adapt to what's going on. It's been really, really cool, along with, you know, other industries. You know, we're not the only one that's adapting. But there was an interesting question the other night. One of the singers got from the audience, and I thought at first it was such a silly question, but then I started thinking about it, and I'm so telling about who we are as people. And so my introductory question to you all is, what is your go-to sandwich?
Oh, it's easy for me. I am a very big corned beef guy, so I'm gonna do beef and Swiss.
Beef and Swiss. How about you, Tim?
I like a spicy Italian. You know, a little. Well, definitely a little sopressata in there, a hot cup of cola, a little salami, you know, stack all that good pork product up, a little bit of sauce, lettuce, onions, no tomatoes for me. And I kind of like, I'm one of those kind of guys, Clint, this is going to shock you. I like the hard, crunchy bun. And I go out on a limb and go for the sort of the hard sort of, calabrese bread, I guess.
Okay, well, that's very specific. We're getting, let's see, we got a pastrami and coleslaw, peanut butter and honey. I don't know that I've ever done that one. Brown sugar ham with Swiss. Others, feel free as attendees to put yours up there as well, enjoying the conversation. For me, it was interesting because the artist actually talked about it as well, and he said, you know, it's just a good old bologna sandwich, and he said it reminded him of being a kid. And then the other one that he was talking about was also took him back to being a kid, was the good old egg sandwich. He just remembered his mom making this for him, and I've hunkered down and been doing more cooking at home, and I've gone back to these sandwiches. Have you guys been doing more cooking at home, or just more at the house, I'm assuming?
I've always been a at-home cooker. I love to cook. It's one of my hobbies. So I would say we're actually eating out more to just do takeout and support our local economy and local restaurants, you know, and leaving big tips when I go. So I've been trying to support.
What about you, Tim?
Yeah, I think we're probably six days a week, sometimes 5 at-home cooking. I'm trying to do more of that myself. So some pretty good barbecue weather too, which has been a lot of fun. Nice pastime to get out back. You know, like Dave, try to support the local business. It's pretty tough, but we're probably 1 or 2 days a week takeout. So that will be Friday this week. And we asked our girls what they wanted. One wanted mac and cheese. One wanted a Caesar salad. So I said, fine, I'll make that at home. So my wife and I can order a nice, like, spicy time that the girls never touch. So I'm looking forward to Friday night date night at home. All right, ducked.
Yeah, that's interesting, Dave. It is supporting the community is interesting, and those obviously in the service industry have been hit really, really hard. So a little bit more serious question for you, and more germane to the topic that we brought you on for. But can you think of an event or an experience that helped to shape or maybe even altered your leadership approaches?
General?
Yeah, in general.
Sure. You want me to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, jump in, go for it.
I don't want to, always be first, but okay, whatever. So I've read a gazillion books on leadership and that sort of thing, and that's really been what has helped me. And when I say read, I mean listened to. I did the audio books. I had a subscription for like 25 years where I got 2 books a month for 25 years. Do the math. That's a lot of books. And those books really were a great education for me and really centered around a lot of leadership things. But the thing that was most probably impactful to me was going and my mentor is Glenn Tecker, who does this seminar called the CEO seminar. It's Chief Elected Officer, Chief Executive Officer seminar that he does symposium actually every year. And if you've never been to that, I highly recommend it. You take your leader with you actually, and I've been to it probably over a dozen times, and it is given me a great foundation for everything dealing with association management anyway.
Tim, I kind of wrote this with you in mind because for those that don't know, you're a former lawmaker in Canada, and so that's a unique position to be in. But was anything in your background that kind of reshaped how you approached leadership?
Yeah, thanks, Clint. I'll second what Dave said. I think that the Tecker seminar with the chief elected officer is fantastic. I do that every year as well. Look, as I should say, I spent 21 years in elected office. I was representative for the Peninsula here in province of Ontario in Canada, and was a minority leader of the Conservative Party. And there are a couple of things that really come to mind through this crisis. We can talk a bit more about it if you like, Clint, later on. One was what happened after 9/11. I was the minister in charge of tourism, culture, and recreation. And what 9/11 was, you cannot overstate the damage caused in American psyche, impacted on Canada as well, and particularly tourism. Everybody stopped traveling. So all of a sudden, kind of like this overnight, everything froze. Hotels vacancies plunged. Nobody was crossing the border. Investments seemed to be going anywhere, and there was a massive layoff in the sector. So how you deal with that, an element of that now in this COVID. And I was also around the cabinet table when our government had to deal with the SARS crisis, which was, did not hit the Americans like it hit Ontario, particularly in Toronto. Lessons learned there on the negative side. Our government was actually criticized for how it reacted to that crisis. So just ironically, happened to be around the table and you saw 2 big elements like a disease there was a big threat, and also the shutdown of tourism travel. The COVID crisis, like both those things combined, but just multiplied, made it even worse. But they both really helped formulate the approach that we've taken at the Ontario Real Estate Association on behalf of Ontario's 80,000 realtors.
Yeah, tell me. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Did the financial crisis we went through last decade, did that affect you guys as much? And how did you deal with it?
Yeah, you know what? Not the same. It did. There's no doubt about it. But conservative lending institutions were more small c conservative, so there wasn't nearly as much exposure, nor the level of government involvement. It exists at a lower level. Dave, it's a great question. So it did cause a recession in large parts of Canada. Ontario sort of hovered around a recession, did all right. Real estate hurt, but actually bounced back better than the American side. I was in politics at that point in time. A year after 2009, so I became a minority leader. So it was unlike this crisis, and the effect was more broad-based. You saw sort of folks were down across the board, but climbing up. It was, relatively straightforward path ahead. You knew you would recover, and certain sectors would be better than others. So I was in politics during that crisis, but the other two, the earlier ones, were much more in line with what we're seeing today.
And Jack's joined us, so greetings, Jack. How are you?
Hi, they're very good. I know, like many of you, I'm on back-to-back of these, and so here I am now, and I apologize for my lateness.
No worries. Wanted to have you chime in on this kind of opening question. Anything in your background that you think really helped to shape kind of your leadership style, or maybe even alter it? Maybe you were in one place before, and obviously we were just talking with Tim, like macro level impacts having been in a legislative level. But anything in your background that's kind of shaped you as a leader?
Well, I think your first like serious professional job does shape a lot of your thinking throughout your career. And I started my career as an engineer and a problem solver. And that's really I've retained that as my principal orientation, is that I'm principally a problem solver. So that's kind of how I've approached the world generally. And doesn't mean you can't develop in other areas, of course you can, but that's how I've come to the table. It's like, there's a problem, let's figure it out, let's fix it. So that's, that influences how I think about everything in some way or another.
Breaking it down into parts, as engineers are apt to do.
Yeah, I'm okay with it's not natural behavior. They beat it into me through 4 years of computer and electrical engineering, where if there's a big problem, it's got a lot of details. I have learned how to suffer through that. I'm not going to claim I always like it, but I've learned how to suffer through it and how to do it well. So I think many people who have thought they needed to be something and win on a career path, you still gain value out of that. That's what I got out of that.
Yeah. What obviously right now there's a large degree of urgency around a number of things, and particularly in the association and MLS space, you have volunteer leaders who are either themselves heavily impacted, have reduced commitments, and so maybe more time to put into this. Any thoughts on how to balance out, in kind of the primary thought that we had coming into this, how do you balance out this urgency or this nervous energy to make decisions now and have an impact now versus understanding what kind of impacts those decisions will have long term, especially under circumstances where you don't know how long term is for this planning scenario? Any thoughts? And feel free to jump in, whoever wants to grab it and go.
Take the lead, Tim.
Is that a pass blue ribbon that came on the screen there, Clint?
Oh, yeah, sorry. It's just a glass. It's not I'm not actually hitting the glass.
See, that's how I cope during the crisis. That's great here. It's off screen. I'm gonna just I can take it back a second. I'm glad to jump into this a little bit and look forward to what Jack and Dave have to say too. I just think that when I thought about this, Clint, if you want to stand tall and firm during a crisis, you have to do so on some fundamental building blocks beforehand. Otherwise, you're in jeopardy just making it up as you go along. So, number one that's guided me through my career that's served well in this crisis is to build lasting and trusting relationships. If you have that throughout different sectors, you can get information faster. You get your calls or your video conferences returned. You get better, more clear answers. You can build allies. So, we have to go to the government for some funding because we've had some changes with our college. We graduate be realtors in Ontario, and somebody who's factory I toured years ago in my old job turned out to be an ally because I kept a trusting relationship, and they'll help us be successful. Number two is you rise to your position of leadership because of your experience, because of your judgment. So you should be informed intuition that guides you. Take chances. Don't try to be all things to all people. Listen, but then act boldly. Go with what got you to where you have gotten to, and that'll get you a step further. And my third sort of fundamental building block that will help you when crisis hits is to have a strong team that you trust, who know in their guts what your mission is all about and how to communicate it. Because you're not going to have time. I mean, the notion of perfection is going to be the enemy during a crisis. So you got to be able to run with your team, understand the mission, trust what the communication is going to be, and then let them execute it. So those are the three things that I think help you when the crisis does hit.
Right, being prepared ahead of time, then very important. Dave, I see you agreeing.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit a nail on the head. Normally, I would say, I'm a big strategic plan guy. I would say, see what your strategic plan can give you for guidance, but nobody strategically planned for this. It's you may have some reserves, and it may be time to spend some rainy day funds, because this qualifies as a rainy day. Just like it's a very similar situation to the big crash of last the big recession. It was, nobody planned that. It wasn't the individual members' fault. There wasn't anything our local association, I was in Charlottesville at the time, there's nothing really we were going to do about it. But you had to rely on the building blocks, as Tim said. And I think that the key here is that your members are not going to remember what you did or what you said or whatever, but they're going to remember how you made them feel. That's stealing of somebody else's quote, I realize. That's really what you're trying to do at this point. This is a very emotional time. It's change is what we're doing. Their lives have been changed. The economy's been changed. Their jobs have been changed. And it's something they have no control over. So there's a very desperate emotional feeling, very much like the financial crisis. And so you've really got to understand that what they're going through is an emotional stages very, very, very similar to the stages of grieving. So if you look at what the 5 stages of grieving are and see how your members go through it, including anger and denial and all that stuff, that's exactly the emotions your members are going to go through. And you've got to understand that when they react at the beginning, yelling at you to get something done, to fix it, or whatever, it's just like they're going through a grieving process, because something that they were invested in and believed in has suddenly gone away.
Jack, curious as to your approach.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about this. I mean, we're a strategy firm. We do a lot of strategy work. And so what you said, Dave, about you want to go back, your strategic plan does not contain this. And that's absolutely right. I mean, the thing with black swans is they're black swans. Nobody sees them coming and they show up. But what you can do is you can say, we're now playing a different game for a little while. So the things that we measured ourselves on, the things that we were doing may shift significantly for a period of time in order to accommodate what's happening right now. And I'll give you some examples. In the broker community, in the agent world, their game just got shifted because a lot of their buyers and sellers hit the pause button and are not doing anything right now. So transactions that were in process, hopefully many of them we've seen have completed, but new transactions may be pushed off for a little while. So in an environment where you can't sell, what can you do? Well, you can engage. You can reach out. You can be present. You can do things that make sure that when the market does come back, you're there. But your game is different. Your game is not going to be how many sales did I get this month. It's going to be how many people did I connect with? How many people did I touch? How many different ways am I communicating now? So you need to recognize the game has changed. So you may need a new strategy for the short term. And I would say the other thing, I think there's an instinct in leadership to react quickly. And I think that's usually a good instinct because it shows that you are paying attention to the situation and what's going on. But everybody pause, everybody take a deep breath, go out for a run, go out for a walk, do something different before you do that. Because there is a high level of emotion, and we've sensed it. We've run mastermind calls with a number of our clients, and we've had people call us in, and there are people worried about losing their businesses, not having any income for months. And so it is very stressful. But the thing is, don't let that take over your decision-making process, because that feeds right into your kind of the older part of your brain, which goes to fight or flight. And what we need right now is we need to think, and then we need to act. And give yourself the space to think and act. Realize you may be playing a different game than you were playing 30, 60 days ago, and that it's shifting day by day. So those are some of the perspectives that I'd have on it. My wife and I are big game players. We play a lot of strategy games together. And so one of the things I've learned from that is each game has a different strategy. And part of the fun is figuring out what's my strategy right now. And that's where we are. We've been handed a game. We didn't want to play this game, but let's figure out how to play it. Let's figure out how to be successful in this new game that was given to us to the best of our ability.
Although I know there's this reference in saying we didn't strategically plan for this, but yet at the core of most quality strategic plans are core competencies or core services, or those things that offer the greatest value to the most constituents, right? And so some of those are still true, and shouldn't we be leaning into some of those? I think, you know, the association world in particular has really leaned into this advocacy capacity, and to your point, Tim, of those like yourselves who are proactive in their advocacy efforts now, I think are having greater and quicker success because they have established themselves as experts, as go-to representatives for the industry. And so I think the action components of your strategic plan might have been eroded, but hopefully the core of who you are and what you do is now being exemplified, right?
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing. Listen to my colleagues there. You know, so a slight disagreement. You still got to be true to your plan, right? You still have to have that mission that motivates you. You still got to follow your North Star. So I think we've done that. Now, we did have to make some pretty bloody-minded decisions out of the gate of things we couldn't achieve in our operational plan in the short term. So some things got canceled. Some things got postponed. We made those decisions quickly, and it was like a load off our shoulders because then we can focus on what's important. But we stuck to our plan. I mean, our vision is to help Ontario realtors succeed in building stronger communities. So this is our whole theme. We shifted our strat plan in its communication, but it's still the same core elements of helping our realtors, giving back to the community. So we've done a lot of the advocacy side for the clients. I mean, our members care deeply about their clients. Are their clients going to be able to move on with purchasing that new home? Are they going to keep their small business? What are they thinking about when they're in their homes today, cooped up with their family now for, you know, a month plus? So we are focusing everything on really building on that vision. Fewer projects within that vision, but being true to our plan. So health and safety first. We were very aggressive in the public sphere, telling our members to shut down open houses, to follow public health guidelines, to first word of advice to any client should be, can this wait until after the crisis is over? I think by being pro-community and pro-public interest as opposed to pro-narrow business, we also then had the ear of government and had some successes, including protecting real estate as an essential service, allowing for urgent transactions to still take place. We're at the table to talk about stimulus and how real estate can help Ontario's economic and confidence recovery. So I think you still got to stay true to that North Star. You might shed a few things out of the ship for the time being, but you still have to sail in the same direction.
Any follow-up, Jack or Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this goes back to your activities may change, but your goals are probably still what they were before. You know, those haven't shifted. So just recognize that you may need different actions right now to get to that goal, and you may not get there the same path you thought you were going before. But you shift, you move. That's what a good leader does. You adjust.
I think you put a premium on the items, and I think Tim referenced it. That shows that you care about your members' health and well-being as much as anything, because there's not a lot we can do to fix the virus issues, but we can protect our members, and having them know that they got your back. I like that, Tim. That's very good. You know, that is as important as anything to what your members are going to hear from the leadership, is that first and foremost, we want you to still be alive when all this is over.
So I'm hearing a lot of that triage kind of approach, and some of those are become very clear and easy to understand, health and well-being, those types of things. But as we move beyond those and we're kind of moving more and more into this limbo state, how do you triage, again, not knowing for how long you have to triage, and also how far out you want to be triaging at this point? Because there was so much immediacy to what we've done over if you look backwards 2-3 weeks, so much immediacy that the ability to triage was pretty simple. But now we're starting to get further from the initiation of it, and we don't know how far we are from the close of it. So any thoughts on that triaging approach when there isn't date certain?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a time where you need to be listening and you need to be adjusting, and based on what people are asking for or saying. I think as a consultancy, one of the things we've been doing is just listening to our clients and where they have, where they need specific help. And, if you're running an organization, there are things you can do to help them. And an example I have is helping people move into some of the tools that allow them to operate their business more digitally. So if you're running an MLS or an association, many of you have done this, upping your training level and your support level for your online digital signatures tools, for your forms tools, for the things that let people work from home more easily, right? So there's places where you go, look, I'm listening that there's a need. Where can we go to find a solution for that? And how can our organization support a solution for that? And put it in place for people. So, but I think it starts with listening in order to understand where the issues are now, and also setting people's expectations about that's how you're going to work. That you are listening to them and you want to hear about their experience, so you can have the opportunity to put in place or help or do things to support. It's when people don't tell you what's going on that you can miss the opportunities to be supportive as a leader or to do things with your organization as a leader.
Great point. I know a lot of state associations here in the States, Tim, have been doing surveys of members, trying to get a handle on what's going on in the marketplace or what's going on with their business, that type of thing. Are you doing that in Canada as well, I take it?
Yeah, we are. No doubt about it. I'll go back to one of my earlier points. Listening is very important, no doubt, but you really got to lead. And people are looking for leadership at this point in time. And moving with speed, decisiveness is not exactly a hallmark and strength of associations. Typically, we're more about process and consultation. It's like, fitting a fish for a set of sneakers, right, to get running. But we've a board that's believed
is that a Canadian thing? I can't say I've ever heard that one.
I've never heard that.
I'm trying to think of an analogy, It's better in French, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, so I'm happy to talk about, how we triaged events and priorities and such. But our first goal was really to show we gave a shit, right? Like to actually get out there to show empathy, first of all, that we get it, that we are listening. As Woody Allen said, to use an American example, 80% of life is showing up, right? So actually being there. Now that's harder to do in this world than it would have been in the previous world, but certainly forums like this and our own replicas, part of that. And then being decisive. I mean, actually making calls to actually take risks. People will stand behind you if they disagree with you, if they see that you're taking leadership and you've got your motives in place and they're explained clearly. So showing up, showing the empathy, being decisive, and third is being transparent. People fundamentally will follow you if you say why you're making the decisions you make, if they understand how you've analyzed the situation, what your motive is, and then why you went with your decision, they're more likely to follow you. And if you don't know the answer, you don't make something up. I think there's a lot of forgiveness right now that we don't know yet. We'll find out, but here's where we think we need to go, so let's get going.
Yeah, that's excellent, Tim. I have a saying that if you don't inform your members, you don't tell them what's going on, then they're going to make stuff up, fill in the gaps that you've left, and it's not going to be good stuff. It never is. It's human nature to fill in gaps with gaps in your knowledge and information with bad thoughts, and especially with all the bad news we have going on. It's too easy to have your members just turn against you if you're not giving them that transparency and all the information and the why of why you're doing different things.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to use an analogy in my old job in politics of the communications equivalent of a tree falling in the forest, right? If nobody's there, nobody hears it. If they don't actually see you taking action, understand the action that you're taking, you're absolutely right, Dave. People will naturally assume, whether realtors or general public, that you're not acting, and they'll put the negative into place.
When you're empathizing, how do you distill, and again, I think it's been easy in the immediacy, but as we're transitioning, how do you distill the want to empathize with those who are expressing real widespread concerns versus those who are expressing individual concerns, and making sure you're choosing the right ones, especially as you represent, whether it's be a large brokerage or a large entity like realtor.com or a large association? How do you make sure you're listening in the right way and empathizing with the right folks and the right approaches, and not just getting at a pain point for today or one person's pain point for that matter?
I think we all have our go-to people or sets of go-to people, and they should be all the same type of people, but people whose judgment that you trust, who talk a lot of other people. You're right, Clint. You may have somebody who's way off in an extreme, and you'll go off in that extreme with them. But if you have those who you trust, who are other experienced leaders who are in touch on the street, they can help make sure that you put a ring fence around what's a reasonable decision and the right type of information. I think in this environment where everything is on the fly, you really got to with your gut with people that you've known for years and grown to trust their judgment.
Jack, how do you do with the gut? I mean, you're the engineer, right? So you're supposed to be methodical and all that. And Tim's telling us I lead with the gut, and there's this charismatic, and let's do it. And how does that resonate with someone like you?
Yeah,
that's more
I mean, it's completely good advice. So I think people should listen to Tim. He's leading a big organization, and he knows what he's doing. I look for fundamentals. I mean, I'm looking for, when is something fun, like, can we break it down into numbers? Can we look at stats? Can we look at what's really happening? What is the truth of the situation, right? And that's an area, I actually think this is an area where association and MLS leaders have a lot of opportunities to really talk about the truth in the marketplace, because it is what it is. And that's where I'm looking for, if one person has a complaint, do 200 other people also have the complaint and they just haven't said it? Or is there some fundamental thing that we need to pay attention to that maybe we haven't noticed? And I think that's where I go, is to, like, it's a clue, it's information. Can we validate it? Can we substantiate it? And is it impacting a lot of people? And if it is, you can act on it. It's something that you probably should lead into and say, we're going to go this direction because I can see that this is impacting a lot of you, whether you're coming to me or not. So that'd be my perspective on it. I don't, listening to your influencers and people that pay attention to the market is one way to get that information. Looking at the facts and the stats and the numbers, and how many sales are we down this month versus the prior month, or where are we seeing activity grow or fall off or unchanged? That can be guidance.
How about you, Dave?
Well, I think it's been interesting. I contact a lot of different associations and MLSs around the country, and on a regular basis, that's my job, right? And so some of them, it's seamless. It's like you have to ask, are you guys working from home? Because it just seems like they're fully functioning. And others, it's like you just leave a message, and there's no mention of, we're not working, or, or anything like that. And so I think the point I'm making is that you need to be transparent and acknowledge what's going on, so that the members know how to get a hold of you, so you can deal with it, both the one worried about their own paycheck or lack thereof, and one worried about whether or not, the country's going to end. You've got to have that balance, but you got to have the communications channel still open. And it's mostly done pretty well around the country, I would say. But there are people that haven't quite acknowledged what's going on, and it's like the elephant in the room. You can't ignore it. We wish we could, but we can't.
I saw in the comments, Ryan posted, they're starting to at least move in a mindset more towards getting back to the regular business. What are your thoughts on especially when you have staff members, leading them through this transition from the state of emergency, the emotional component, and, having immediate and really acknowledgeable impacts to, maybe we go back into that day-to-day, or more incremental in the decision making, the impact that it makes. So, because at some point we're going to start to move back into that workflow, and getting people to transition from that state of urgency and the impact that we get to see, like here and now, versus these are long-term, these are the things that are the building blocks. So if we find ourselves back in this situation in 6-8 months, we're prepared for it. Any insights on that leadership, whether it be for volunteer leaders or, Jack, you have a unique perspective of being in the broker world, where brokers are also leading folks, but in a very different capacity than what the association does.
Yeah, it's cat herding. it's really, and I think that's where we are as an industry, though. We have a lot of independent contractors, and so I think there's a reason why some of the top leaders in the industry did things like take pay cuts and say, look, we know we're in it with you, right? So so that there's that empathetic, that's like, we're in it with you. And I think as people move back to regular, not regular operations, I don't think this is gonna be regular for a while. people are not going to, they lift the stay-at-home stuff. A lot of people are still going to stay home because they're scared to come out. They don't want to get this virus, and the virus is still going to be out there. It's not going to go away. So I think it's about, again, providing good information, helping people understand what everything Tim said about transparency. You know, that is what will help you move people into, we're going to return to not business as usual, but business as right now. And we're going to help you get there step at a time. So that's my perspective on it. This is all new territory for all of us. So that transparency, I think, really helps for you. If you make a mistake, you know, people are going to forgive it if they understood where you were headed.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, Jack. And I think there's some good examples out there of how things are not going to change back, or things that that we've learned already during this process that we're going to continue to move forward with, including what we're doing right now. More and more virtual meetings, which we've all talked about for years. I used to be a meeting planner like 30 years ago, and we were talking about it back then. And It seems like it's, you know, a month ago, Clint was probably the only one on this screen that heard of Zoom. You know, you know, now it's like it's almost a verb. You know, so it's that type of change that is going to change the way we do business, and there'll be definitely some reluctance for a while to leave your home or to go to a association meeting or God forbid a football game. You know, I mean, there's so many things in our lives that are going to take a while to get back to normal, and some things we maybe don't want to get back to normal. I think we've all had a chance to pause and figure out what is really important. One of my favorite quotes, and I used it a lot in the financial crisis, and it applies differently, but to today as well, was from Warren Buffett. And that was that when the tide goes out, you find out who's been swimming naked. And what's meant by that is, you know, the things that have been doing that we should have been doing, or that we should have been doing differently, those are all exposed now. And this gives us a great opportunity to learn different skills and different things that can take us forward and help us be better and adapt to the future. One of the things I talk about all the time is nobody has any time. Well, some of the stuff we're learning nowadays helps us save time, and that's the most valuable thing we have in our lives.
Tim, anything to add?
Yeah, you know, a little trick I learned in the old job in politics. The moderator asked me a question I don't like, I just answer a different question altogether. I had to try that.
I think that's a politician's approach, right?
Just to go back a few minutes, really appreciate what Dave and Jack had to say there. Just a few minutes ago, we were talking about optimism, and I think that's something that a lot of political leaders are missing right now. Some are, and it'd be helpful for us in real estate as well. And that's to have a bit of optimism in your communications. Not Pollyanna. You're not spinning something that's not true. You'll still be grounded in realism. But the more you can talk about, we are going to get through this. We have your back. We're going to help you get through this, and we'll be there, you know, when we do. The politicians are talking about unwinding and letting the economy go forward again. I think we're actually on the right side of this issue, because I'm just sick and tired of politicians lecturing me like, you know, some high school principal, all things I can and can't do, and everything that's wrong, and the debt today and all that. I think a little sunshine this time of darkness will go a long way, provided you're still grounded in realism. We try to work that into our communications, and I think they'll be welcomed by those who are afraid of what comes next. Just a bit of optimism. And just that made me think of a story too, to my first point about building a team that is on the mission you can trust around you. So I actually was in sunny California when the major crises are breaking in Ontario. California started shutting down, and our prime minister called for all Canadians to come home, or else you might not get across the border. So my wife and I had a debate with our two daughters, 12 and 6, whether we, you know, hunker down in California or head back to Toronto. She won the debate. We got on a red eye back to Toronto. But I had a dilemma there, because my team was then moving to make our operation fully remote, and they were moving quickly. Luckily, we had a bit of a plan in place because we had some snowstorms. So we had thought the Black Swan might have been a major blizzard, nobody get to the office, so how can we operate remotely in the light of a major snowstorm? So my CFO became my acting CEO, and there was a dilemma. I mean, how much do I try to lead this from vacation in California or trust my acting CEO and my team to execute. I made the right call and held back. I asked her to brief me what was going on, but I let her make the decisions. And Clint, I'm real proud because, within 48 hours, they had moved to fully remote operation, and it's gone smoothly. I made the right call to have the team in place and then keep my hands off.
So I know we want to maintain that. I'm on the optimist train. I mean, I really, that's just my natural state of being. And when I see duress, I typically see what the opportunity is to learn and grow and do better. But obviously we have to balance that out as leaders, and there's probably nothing more important in our organization than our budgets. And right now, that there are some leaders who are choosing to empathize by either delaying collection of fees and dues or putting them off altogether. And again, these are one of those things where an immediate want to empathize with that could have really significant long-term impact. So what are your thoughts on terms of kind of that core piece of letting our budgets drive our decision making and our planning? How do you address that with an optimist approach, but also being realistic under these circumstances, which we don't?
Well, I'll be very direct about what our board of directors has had to say. We obviously are very sympathetic to members and their financial insecurity and who knows how long it's going to last. Our dues are $110, so we're not that much. We have 80,000 members, so I guess it's a good budget per year for our member services. But the bottom line is our board members said, look, this is a time when associations shine. This is a time when you actually need your association most to deliver on services. So we could reduce dues for the quarter and give everybody $25, 3 copies a month, or we could actually deliver on services that are going to help them, information needed in this day and age, high impact advocacy. We're looking at programs to support our members from mental health issues, advice on their finances. By pooling across all of our members, we can deliver some programs that are going to help them out in their time of need. My board's been very clear about that. It's a time for associations to actually rise to the occasion and deliver, not hunker down and reduce their influence.
Well said.
Jack, it's interesting. I'm curious because, in one of the CMLS forums that I was in, the Realty Alliance group, one of the things that they were saying is that the MLSs should be thinking about their broker community, and they should be looking to either reduce or delay fee collection for MLS related services. And some of them are choosing those tactics in their own brokerages, and others aren't. But what's your take on that? This is a significant decision that if you make this choice now, it could have long-term consequences and can come back around. And if this prolongs, one time may not be enough. And so, one decision now becomes, a decision down the road that you have to have another conversation about.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends organizationally where your organization is from a rainy day fund and reserves perspective and providing services and value perspective, because those have to be balanced. And there's a lot of organizations, different sizes, different capabilities, different amount of staff, different budget, all that. And so I think that's a hard one to answer as a blanket. But I will say that many of the MLSs that provide a lot of tools and services and value, I think they are potentially a lot more valuable right now, because brokers are looking to cut some of their expenses. They're looking for areas where they can maybe get rid of something that they don't need anymore, or that they've needed less and less. And maybe they can rely on the association or the MLS that's providing a great tool or service or some sort of support system for them. And so I think there's an opportunity. This is the same message. We said the same message to the brokers. We said, look, many of your agents are looking for places to reduce their expenses, and you guys are already paying for a bunch of tools and technology and have some support staff in place. You can tell them, like, hey, use our stuff. You can let go of that, $200 a month in tech stuff you're spending on, because we have it, and we're going to focus on training and really helping you through this situation right now with our staff. And I think that's very similar to the association and MLS's situation, both to the agent member and to the broker member, to say, look, we have invested in tools, services, and support for you, and we bulk bought. And man, MLSs have been great about bulk buying. I mean, they're getting stuff for pennies on the dollar in some cases for great software tools, programs, and services. Like now's an excellent time for that message to say, look, now's the time, use our stuff. We're going to train you on it. We're going to support you. And you don't have to pay maybe some of the other vendors that you were paying because you thought you needed something different, and maybe you don't. So I think there's a silver lining there. I think that now is a good time for organizations that have made those investments to make use of them and to support them really well for their membership.
We have a poll up right now asking if you're going to review or reassess your budget mid-year because of the circumstances. You can click on the poll and fill that in. Dave, has there been any talk kind of through the realtor.com circles of, fee reductions or reducing that or because you guys get more than your fair share hits about, some of the fees
Sure.
and things that are charged. Any conversations around that?
Yeah, absolutely. Our leadership jumped on it pretty early and reduced fees 60% for I believe it was for the month of April. And that was when we didn't have the knowledge that we have today. So where we're going with that, I have no idea. But we definitely understand that the cash flow issues of our customers right now has been cut more than likely, and in most cases, and we need to take some action to make sure we're showing loyalty to them that they've shown to us.
Yeah, and I guess the question becomes then, how do you put that genie back in the bottle if things do become protracted?
Well, the demand for what we are selling, so to speak, has historically been high, and so it's all supply and demand with everything, and this is no exception. When the marketplace does rebound, and granted it might be the fourth quarter before it really does, then I suspect that we'll have to work our way back to the levels of demand that we were at before, us as a company as well as the real estate as an industry.
Jack, specific to you, any cues or lessons that you're picking up that maybe associations and MLSs should look into in terms of, managing through this and making organizational decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I can just share what we're talking to the brokers about and how that can be leveraged at the association and MLS level. I'm going to leave for interpretation, but in the housing recession that we had, 2008, 2009. About a quarter of the top 500 brokerages went out of business because they didn't have enough cash. They didn't have enough cash and they couldn't sustain. Now, granted, our recessions, that's the only one we've had that was housing led, because that was a housing recession, literally. This is not a housing recession. It's a different situation. But we did learn some things from that. And one of those is we've advised the brokers cash. You need to have cash on hand. You need to be ready to operate in a limited environment. So anything that associations and MLSs can do to help their membership understand how to do that, how to go through a lean period. We think we've done some reprojections with some of our broker members as to what their companies are going to look like for the rest of the year, and gone quarter by quarter, month by month. And they're going to be, 20 to maybe as much as 25% off for the year. They're running business models that are at between 4 and 7% profit. So a lot of them, that's very challenging. So those are some of the things that we're seeing on the broker side, where it's like they are, and I'm an optimist, and our brokers are optimists. The ones we're talking to, they're talking about, how to leverage this to recruit, to build their businesses, to be stronger when they come back. But they need to face that reality of it's going to be lean for a while, and then it's going to come back. And so that's the piece that where, as an association or MLS leader, A, if you're empathetic with that, and B, if you can provide support and help for that, whether that's understanding your local programs, your state programs, the unemployment, the PPP, any of those programs that will help the brokers, and just being knowledge of those will move them forward and will help you be a resource to them. So that's the perspective I have on it, coming from the recent work we're doing with brokers in our programs.
Interesting you bring up, the counts. Of course, associations and MLSs are much like many brokerage models, headcount based. And so curious, and we'll throw up another poll question. It looked like, a majority were saying they're not necessarily going to go back to their budget. And those that are said that they typically do anyway, and a small percentage saying, yeah, we're doing that under the circumstances. But of course, a large component of any budget for the association and MLS space is the numbers. And so curious as to Dave or Tim, your thoughts thoughts on membership numbers at the end of the year versus what you entered the year with? And Jack's saying, on the brokerage space, maybe that 25% capacity. Any insights or thoughts there on what we could expect on as we go through all of this?
I think we'll see very little change, actually. And I think there's some logistical reasons that we won't, and that is that they pay their dues at the beginning of the year, and largely everybody was paid before this all really hit the fan, significantly at least. So you already have your membership. You don't, really, now we'll see people cutting back. Obviously they can't attend classes. They may drop out of the MLS for a while, that type of thing. There may be some adjustments and certainly some loss of revenue for associations. But I think in the end, this time next year, we'll probably have close to, within, I'll say 3%, the same amount of members as we currently have right now.
Tim, any thought, is the market in Canada similar or different? Any thoughts on how it will respond?
Yeah, we're trying to gauge that now, so probably too early to tell. I think it depends on how deep and lasting any kind of recession would be post-COVID. So the initial things we're seeing, Clint, we are seeing people who are dual members of multiple boards who are eliminating the dual membership. So that's a fact that's impacting on some member boards. And the other phenomenon, I think we will see some part-time realtors park their licenses, get on the market temporarily to save on some short-term costs. I mean, we have 80,000 members in the province of Ontario. If you divide transactions by the number of members, I think it worked out to slightly less than 1 per member, something like that on an annual basis. And quite frankly, there are too many members in the province of Ontario. The bar is too low. As a long-term goal, we need to actually make it harder to get into the profession and easier to kick people out when they break the rules. So if there is some shedding, that might be for the long-term benefit of the profession.
Yeah, it's always interesting because there's the volunteer leaders perspective on that, and then there's the organizational leaders perspective on that, looking at the impacts to the budgets. But I find it interesting, and I've had this conversation multiple times with folks, is that historically NAR's membership has been somewhat related to the unemployment, and as unemployment has been pretty low, that NAR membership's still been growing. And some of my contention, and maybe it's influenced by where I live, and Jack, you probably have this same experience in your backyard as well, is there are so many people who are underemployed and living in places because of the quality of life. And so I think that's been an insulator for that. But it will be interesting. Obviously unemployment is going to be fairly high for some time, and could that actually end up stimulated the opposite impact of what some are thinking, in terms of people saying, well, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to become an entrepreneur, and real estate is actually a fairly low entry opportunity. And so I think it'll be interesting to see if there is a washout component, are there equal numbers who are coming in because they see real estate as an opportunity, especially if there's a return in many of the markets that were solid before. So that's kind of a different perspective on it that might come into effect as well. All right. Well, I think we're winding down on time, and I know Jack's probably got another webinar to be on. Are you another webinar?
I have just a regular meeting after this. Thankfully, I've had 3 hours of webinars today. So,
any thoughts on just in general? Because again, we have a lot of folks that lead these volunteer, boards, and so again, they're that stability. They're the ongoing, looking at long-term impacts, and not just year to year necessarily that some of the volunteer leaders have. But any insights again on balancing out this urgency and this sense of, we've got to make big decisions and big impacts now without thinking about the long term, and ways to manage that, and especially, as this lingers on, anything that you would leave as words of wisdom?
Can I tell you the biggest thing on my mind? It's not exactly what you asked about, Clint, but
yeah.
And I did hear what even Jack had to say too. The hardest thing I think is morale. In this environment, where the negativity surrounds us, the constant drip of bad news, the uncertainty, especially in this world in real estate, they're people, they thrive on human interaction. They thrive on a variety of different, people and environments to be in an everyday basis. And as much as I love talking to folks on my laptop, it's killing me, right? And trying to manage well when you have a loved one at home ain't easy. Like, I feel like I'm failing as a dad, as a teacher, as a principal, and as a CEO, let alone a husband. So managing in this environment where people are dealing with this new kind of stress that's all around them, trying to manage their own homes, being trapped in like a box, and where no matter what everybody says, I think productivity has been impacted quite negatively. So leading your team through this is awfully difficult. And I notice it on the face of my team. So what have I tried to do? I've actually, the last couple of Mondays, I've just given folks a break. I just say, you know what? Mondays will be a down day for us, blow off steam. You got to catch up. You got to line up, get your friggin' groceries for an hour. Go out and do that. So I'll see if we can continue that. The team's actually risen to the occasion. I've also found the most creative types in my operation, sort of the social committee types, right? And I said, let's start putting in some products to keep people linked in, to keep them entertained, to try to humanize this, and to try to reduce the isolation that staff are feeling from the colleagues that they know and like and miss. So that's been the hardest thing, and that's the way we try to address it. And I'd love to hear more tips about it, because that's what I worry about the most with my team.
I would agree with you on that. It's difficult. I'm on the Myers-Briggs spectrum. I'm a thinker, not a feeler with the way I make decisions. And so it's tough for me to worry about what somebody else is feeling, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You don't feel how, but we all need to, whether we're thinkers like me or feelers like other leaders, we need to not discount the emotional stress that our members are under and our staffs are under. And we also need to make sure we're staying centered with caring about them as people, not just as employees, but about their lives and what's going on with their lives, and giving them the tools they need to work from home and making accommodations. And in the short run, those are the things that will build loyalty in your staff when you have that, when they know you care about them, when the company cares more about them. And I will say my company's really stepped up, taking me off the road in early March, long before any shelter in places were going on. I was like, are they kidding? It's no big deal. I was a little bit in denial of how serious this was. And now I look back on it and I go, man, my company really stepped up. They really cared. They were more worried about me than they were about the bottom line or getting stuff done. And, shortly after that, everybody started canceling their meetings, but they did it. They, canceled everything beforehand and said, stay home. This is not the time you want to be traveling.
Jack, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, the question around morale, I think, is a big one, and I'll just share with you some of the things I'm seeing. I think people are just desperate for connection and for feeling socially connected because they have been so isolated. And I tapped into this accidentally myself 3 weeks ago. I love people. I love being with people. Hadn't seen anybody. It was a Friday, and I said, look, I'm just gonna do a Zoom happy hour, send it out to a few friends. And I thought we'd get together for an hour. We were on that thing for 4.5 hours. People were cooking dinner. People were hanging out. They were in their houses. They were, their guard was down. It was just, it was great. And that's one of the things is like making yourself available. And then I did it again Saturday night. Now I'm doing it 3 nights a week, typically for 3+ hours with the community I'm connected to. And I have people say, oh, thank you for doing this. And we're so glad you're hosting. And I'm like, I need it as much as you guys. So I think it's that part is working. The other piece is I'm watching the brokers do this. They're getting very creative. One of our brokers had a pizza party for their whole team, found out what pizza everybody wanted, and individually had them all sent out. And then they had for a video conference. So people are getting creative about how to maintain that, esprit de corps and we're in this together spirit in this time. And I think anything you can do to push that along. I'm updating my contact list, getting everybody's addresses, because I'm just going to start sending things to people that I care about just to let them know. A few of our friends two nights ago, we just drove by everybody's houses and said, hey, we're out front. We want to wave at you, right? And we did that. We did a little socially distant chat and waved at them. We saw 3 of our friends that way, and it made their day. It just made their day. So I think looking for the opportunities to show up and be there for people and putting in that extra effort. They're going to remember that after this, and it feels good too. I've felt better myself when I've reached out and created those opportunities, and been a little vulnerable about my own experiences with it, where I don't like being isolated either. So I think that would be my takeaway, my suggestion.
It is funny to watch folks. It's almost like watching children as they're getting to know each other, where they would just stand and stare at each other from a distance. Now social distancing, that's just a typical conversation. I've seen it in my neighborhood a couple of times. Is they all just look like, for me, one of the things I conscientiously did this week, because I like the one-to-many aspects of Zoom and all of that, but I've really been missing the one-to-one conversations, which are still available via these types of mechanisms. And so I conscientiously put down, 3 or 4 folks in the industry that I'd always wanted to spend some time with, just casually talking, no agenda, no nothing. And so I picked them out. And so I've specifically sent out messages saying, hey, can we just connect one-to-one here and without an audience or any of those things. And so that's been a shift that I've made with utilizing the Zoom. And again, getting back to what you were talking about, Tim, is more that interpersonal relationship and feeling like we can have some conversations that are a little more private and just, be honest. Not that we're not in a large setting always, but it's just easier to kind of, in that one-to-one capacity just to share with everyone. But thank you all for being the one-to-many today. I appreciate you sharing your time and your expertise. We want you all to stay safe out there.
Thanks, Clint. Thanks for giving
me take care.
To wear size pajamas.
Indeed. Also, just for those that are still tuned in, Jack and Stefan tomorrow are doing their Fireside Friday chats, and I'm going to be expanding on this week and actually bringing in a guest. So I'm very excited about that. You can get signed up with that. We'll put in the comments, the chat section. I think Chris will add that, so you can get signed up for that. Jack, quickly, you guys are bringing in a guest this week. That's a little different. Nope, you're on mute.
Decided leaders over the next few weeks, and we're talking to Robert Refkin tomorrow. So we're going to bring him in and talk a little bit about some of the changes he's seeing and the markets that he's in. So, but we're bringing some of the T3 Summit format into our Fireside Fridays. So you'll see that over the next few weeks. And thanks.
And then we have Tactical Tuesdays as well. So, so you can check those out. So thanks to everybody. Be safe out there. Find some one-on-one time this weekend, and take care of yourself mentally as well. So we will take this opportunity to say, see you later.
Adios. Bye.